Various channeled information on the life of Christ is quite different from mine. The reason for this lies in the fact that every channel who taps into the Akashic records reads into them their own interpretation of basic facts. The Akashic records are where all experiences and knowledge and wisdom gained in each incarnation feeds back to. These records are stored in the divine mind, but they are only a small part of the divine mind, making up perhaps only 1/5 or less of it as a rough estimate. The material I gathered was given from one very close to the actual events, Joseph. It seems that I have the ability to be in touch with my spiritual family tree. I brought this material through by tapping into the life of Joseph, the father of Jesus, who was part of the line of illumination as shared with King David, which is my own particular communication line. I was reaching back that line and contacted Joseph before I did David, because David was an ancestor of Joseph. The stories in part 1 are about the childhood years of Jesus from the time he was a baby until he reached his teens. Jesus loved the carpenter shop. As a babe, he would sit on the floor and play with the wood shavings. Once he got a large splinter in his rear and it became infected. He had to lie down instead of sit for quite a while, but he didn't fuss about it. He would lie and let his eyes follow Mary around the room doing her chores. As soon as he was old enough, Joseph would let him try to make little things with scraps of wood. Jesus, unlike most children, was very interested in the different kinds of wood used and in the beauty of the grain of each different kind. His favorite was myrtle, which in that time period and location was a large, plentiful tree. He used the scraps of wood in his teaching of his brothers and sisters. He would use them in many ways, such as teaching the little ones how to add and subtract. He used them with the older ones to show them the building of the universe as he saw it at that age. He also would use them as disciplinary measures and awards for good behavior. They were highly prized by the children of that time period as toys. When the children would start squabbling and fighting, Jesus would act as an arbitrator and diplomatically try to settle the differences. He would keep especially pretty and smooth pieces of wood to give to any child that had done some deed to earn them. When the boys were raking the shavings up around the carpenter shop, twigs and leaves and small stones kept getting mixed up with the shavings. They wanted to keep the shavings clean, as there were many uses for them around the home. One was filling for pillows, another was packing to take things to market, even taking the shavings themselves to the market. This they did when enough had accumulated, but they had to be clean, so the boys had to painstakingly separate the foreign matter out of the shavings. They realized their job would be much easier if they could catch the shavings before they were contaminated by foreign material. They decided that one of them would always be present when work was being done in the shop, and therefore the shavings never did get soiled after that decision. Jesus often sat in a clearing in the woods, whittling at a piece of wood from the carpenter shop. He became intrigued with the circles the grain of the wood made and tried to compare them with people's lives. Starting in the center was their birth and spiraling outward in ever-expanding and widening circles until the very last ring before the bark. He compared the bark to their form or body, and the wood to their personality, and the inner core to their soul. As he was carving the wood to make an image, he started cutting away at the bark. Then he cut into the grain of the wood and reshaped that part of it that was necessary to give a different form. But he never cut into the core, as this would spoil forever that particular piece of wood, as far as making a carving out of it went. As he chipped away at the bark and peeled it off layer by layer, he started exposing the beautiful grain underneath the ugly roughness of the bark. He then sanded and smoothed the rough edges until the new exposed wood was as smooth as satin. The core was never touched, but was closer to the surface now that the heavy, rough outer layer was gone. He experimented with several pieces of wood all about the same size and tried making different shapes and forms out of them. Some he fashioned in the shape of different animals, some he made geometric designs out of, and some he made into faces. But no matter what the finished shape was, he found that the core, the very first ring of wood, ended up in the exact center of each carving. Jesus had to watch the younger children a lot and did more to help Mary with her chores than he did to help Joseph, simply because Mary needed to have the help more. Therefore, any time he got to go out to the carpenter shop and help Joseph was very precious to him. While they worked, he and Joseph would talk about life and the spiritual values they believed in, and Jesus would voice his despair over the way most of his friends fought over material things even then. The fences in the areas surrounding Jesus' home were made of brambles twisted and knotted together. They were needed to keep livestock from straying and also helped keep the younger children in the family from wandering too far. One day, when Jesus was watching the children while Joseph and Mary were at the marketplace, one of the little ones became missing. Jesus and the others searched everywhere inside the fences for the missing one. Finally, one of the dogs discovered a hole in the bramble fence and began barking and trying to get through. Jesus went out by the gate and found the little one a goodly ways down the road. He was lost and didn't know how to get back inside the fence. He was also all scratched up and bleeding. Jesus took the little one in his arms and wiped away the blood and tears and carried him back inside the fence. Then he went to see what he could do to repair the fence and tried to figure out what had caused the hole in it to start with. While repairing it, he discovered bits of cloth caught on the brambles and realized that the hole had been started from the outside and was being worked inwardly. This surprised him, and he realized then that an outsider was trying to get in to do some mischief. What he didn't know was why. From then on, they all watched the small children much more closely and watched the fence, looking for more evidence of it being tampered with. In this way, they guarded against harm to the family from outsiders. There was a certain kind of sweet that Jesus dearly loved. It is similar to our taffy today. As a special treat at rare times, he was allowed to make it for himself and the younger brothers and sisters. One time, while pulling it after cooking, he realized that it hadn't been properly cooked because it was sticking to everyone's hands. They had a big mess. They were all more or less stuck to each other with sticky strands of candy. Some of the little ones started crying. When Mary and Joseph entered the room, Jesus turned this episode into a sermon, saying he was demonstrating what happens to people when they aren't prepared properly for a certain task. If they try to do something before the correct time, it will be a disaster. He had a twinkle in his eye, and before it was over, he had the whole family laughing very hard. But he had again taken an ordinary, everyday incident and turned it around and received a good, valuable lesson himself, that timing was very important. Jesus did indeed enter into debates with those who questioned his answers in the temple. He was very gentle but stubborn with his answers. The priests could neither get him to change his mind nor trick him into contradicting himself. His beliefs from the time he was a child never faltered. What a lesson this should be for people. But the difference is that he had the truth to stand on. People today do not. Is it any wonder they falter and fall by the wayside?